Hello guys, how are we all doing? Welcome back to another video. Now, I know my predictions for the championship only came out yesterday, and Alexis, who I'm joined by with today, has only put his predictions out today as well. This is an interesting video because we're looking at our championship predictions, which, like I say, have only just gone out in the last 24 hours. And we're looking at if we had to put each team higher or lower in the championship table, where would we put them? I'm joined by Alexis now. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I think this concept is very, very interesting because you would hear it if I were to say with my video, which literally probably would have been released about 15 minutes before this video came out there. There's three factors that determine the movement when you do your updated predictions. A lot of people do their updated predictions within a month within the season. You take into granted about the transfer window with it being finalised. You take into consideration the loan market, especially within that part of the transfer window as well. And then you potentially look at injuries as well, and then, the lengths of those as well. So those three factors, I think, will be definitely three that we'll apply in terms of if we're going to move each team, would it be higher or lower? It should make for a very interesting video, but thank you for having me on the channel. I'm deeply honoured.
No worries at all. And like I say, guys, Alexis's video has come out, so go check his channel out. I'll leave a link in the description. Go subscribe to him, and let's see where we put each championship team. I'll start as we go through in alphabetical order with my prediction for Birmingham City, which was 24th. So by default, I have to put them higher because they cannot finish any lower. And with Birmingham, I have a feeling they will get relegated, and I was kind of shuffling around my bottom three. But like I say, by default, Birmingham City, for me, have to start in higher. I think there is a possibility they could survive with the championship experience they've got, but I'm having to put them in higher regardless. Alexis, your thoughts on Birmingham?
So in my video, I've also got Birmingham to finish in the bottom three. Not 24th place, though. I have given them a little bit of, a lifeline and put them in 23rd this time. So very similar predictions there. Basically, I think with this season, it's very much John Eustace coming in with a promising CV at the wrong place and the wrong time, really, to be honest, because I think Birmingham right now going through their transitional phase with, I don't even know what the hell they're doing off the field with their ownership right now. That's not really been a good factor in that. I don't see them scoring many goals. They have had a lack of activity. There's very few transfers that really make me feel that Birmingham will go that step up. And you've got to consider as well, without the points deductions, they would have only survived on goal difference last year as well. So they were very lucky to still be within the championship season. And if I were to say, to be fair, I probably would actually say higher, just with the benefit that Eustace could potentially have a good bit of form at some stage of the season. But other than that, I don't really see Birmingham finishing that much higher, to be honest.
Interesting. Now, we've got Blackburn Rovers next, and this is your team. I've put them 19th. You'll have to let me know where you've put Blackburn Rovers.
So I put Blackburn Rovers a little bit higher than 19th, actually. And Benjamin Bloom also put them in 19th as well. Just thought you'd know that. I put them in 16th place in the table a little bit. So in around that lower half part of the table. So not too far away, a 3-place difference. Basically, we've got the uncertainty of Brereton Diaz across us as well. They've already lost players like Rothwell. They've already lost Van Heck, a big part of their back line, and they've lost Ryan Liambe as well. 3 crucial first-team players. So I think Blackburn will drop off a bit. And John Dale Thomas, and whilst I respect what he's done, he's the very few managers in the Championship with Champions League experience. That's not going to necessarily say that he's going to cut it as an English manager right away. I think Blackburn will definitely be a slow burner of a team and just basically start slow, but then eventually they'll build up. So maybe if they have a good form a little bit later on, they probably would finish higher. But typically what Blackburn have done over the years when they've been promoted to the Championship is that they actually start well and then they have a really poor second half. So I'm kind of thinking of the Uno reverse of that, to be honest. So yeah, that's what I think will happen. New manager, completely new system, transitional phase. I think they could potentially improve on my 16th place finish if things click and Ben Brereton stays. But it is a very, very risky prediction on my part as well, because there's a lot that can click wrong for them as well.
Interesting. So we're putting Blackburn Rovers in higher. Now, next up, we've got Blackpool, and this is my turn. I've put Blackpool in 21st. Now, I didn't think a few weeks ago I would put them so far down the table. Obviously, they had a very impressive season last year, and I thought they'd build on it or at least hold. I haven't put them to go down, of course. I don't think too many people are, but I have expected them to drop off. I think they would finish higher if they were to finish higher or lower than 21st. I think it's really hard for me to predict that bottom six. It was quite congested. The reason I put them down there a bit is because they lost Critchley, and I think he was so important to what they were. But I'm going to say Blackpool, if they finish anywhere other than my prediction, I do think they'll finish a bit higher. I know my sister backs them to finish a bit better than that. What's your thoughts on Blackpool?
Well, we do agree a place. I've also put them in 21st place. I mean, it's a bit of a tragedy with Blackpool. They had so much optimism at the end of the season, didn't they? And then Critchley shockingly departs to join Aston Villa's assistant head coach role, the role that Michael Beale also left as well. So this roundabout of championship managers has really caused a stir, actually, for the championship teams. Personally, I won't lie, this Blackpool squad, I felt overachieved a bit. And I think Neil Critchley was a big part of that overachievement part of it. Their budget is in the bottom five in terms of the teams in the league, so I expect them to be in that bottom five region now, as I think it will even things out. And Appleton as well, the longest, actually the shortest serving manager for Blackpool ever in their history, only managed 11 games in his first campaign for them as well. So previously he's not done so well there. I think he has improved, and he's got a bit of a point to prove as well. And I'm hoping that might actually push Blackpool a bit higher than what I've originally predicted. But I would actually say things could even go a little bit more wrong, and they could even go down. So I would actually say lower instead. But I do understand what you meant about higher as well, because they do have the flair players still in Josh Bowler and CJ Hamilton, who can do quite well. Gary Medine can still chip in with a couple of goals. But yeah, with the managerial decision in, and if it doesn't go well with the fan base, it could go a little bit wrong there. So I would probably say lower for Blackpool, actually.
Interesting. Okay, next up we have got Bristol City. Now, this is your team to place, but I actually put them 17th. And a word on what I would say is I would probably nudge them up the table a little bit. I found predicting from 10th down to about 18th the hardest region in the Championship this season. What's your thoughts? Where have you put them?
Yes, so I have predicted them quite a fair bit higher than 17th, actually. So I've predicted them to finish in 11th, actually in the top half, just creeping in there. So Bristol City, and you'll hear this if you saw my video, what I actually liked about them is that they've not gone gung-ho. They've not tried to spend money too much. They've not tried to get all the players. They've gone for quality over quantity, and I think they've needed to do that as well. Two great defensive players in getting Naismith and Kane Wilson from Forest Green Rovers there, which I think will improve their squad. And I think they prioritised their positions that they really needed improving on. Their back line was ultimately shambolic, to put it light, to be honest, last year. And they've already addressed it with two fresh faces there. They've not lost too many players. The fact they kept the players as well that were linked with moves away, especially the likes of Semenyo, is really giving me a lot of confidence that going forward, they'll actually have the same good form that they had at the end of the season. And personally, the only thing that holds me back a little bit of my judgment is Nigel Pearson. His points per game is not so impressive, with only 1.6, I believe his points per game is, which doesn't necessarily suggest a team being in around the top half. But I think, having said that, if they were to finish anywhere, I probably would predict Bristol City to finish a little bit lower than 11th. I think 11th for me is around their peak. If they finish above that, it's an incredibly overachieving season in a really good way. So for me, I probably would put them in lower out of what I've predicted.
Interesting. So that was our first prediction where there's a big sort of disparity between it, but that's what our individual predictions are all about. Next up, we've got Burnley, and I feel like you won't agree with me. I haven't seen your predictions yet, but it's my team, and I put them 9th, and I found the playoff race really hard to dissect. I said when we've done a video previously on your channel how out of the three relegated teams, I have a suspicion they could perform the worst, maybe with not so much championship experience as Norwich and Watford. And obviously Vincent Kompany could do amazing, but he's very unfamiliar to the championship. And some of the players are as well. A lot of youngsters. I put them 9th. I think if I had to change my mind, I would put them in my top 6. So I'm going to say higher. But your word on Burnley?
Yes, this was the team I thought immediately we would say a little bit different for. So I've gone for fifth place for Burnley. So it's not too high, like in terms of the top three, because I generally think a lot of people are going to predict different things for Burnley. You know, you, for example, are predicting them, outside the top six. I think some might even predict them to get automatically promoted because I think their squad, especially with the players they've kept as well, is showing that they've actually got a really good championship squad. I actually think out of the three newly promoted teams, they actually do have one of the best depths in most positions in around the starting 11 as well, especially now they've actually got a goalkeeper in Muric as well. That was one area that I was a little bit worried about that they were not going to strengthen, but now they have. I think they've been really shrewd with their business and have made some great signings along the way of that. I do think this is how I explained in my predictions. I actually think Burnley will start quite well and they will sizzle away a bit like for what we've had with Sheffield United when we had a season of two halves. I think Burnley will have a little bit of that and potentially run out of steam near the end, but just scrape top six and finish fifth place. And if I were, I tell you what, in terms of higher or lower, it'll be literally only within by one place or whatever. I'm probably edging Burnley still to finish maybe that bit higher, to be honest. I still think that squad is capable of promotion. It's just really the balance of inexperience of Vincent Kompany and with those players not, having a lot of championship experience. But I do think the mould together should potentially be around top two worthy. But obviously, with a new manager, most of the time things don't click straight away. So for me, I'll still say a bit higher, but probably still within the playoffs.
Okay, next up we have got Cardiff City, and I'm yet to know where you've put Cardiff, and obviously this is your team to place. I put them 18th, and once again a team probably similar to with my Bristol City prediction. I wanted to nudge up, but it just felt like I was going to have to be harsh to someone. Where have you put them, and would you change it for the better or worse for them?
I mean, already I changed it for the better. I've got them in 17th, and I completely agree with you. I am impressed. To tell you the truth with their transfer business, 12 signings that they made as well, which is an absolute joke to even get 12 players in at this stage. And there's still a good amount of time left in the transfer window as well. And I wouldn't even be surprised if they even get some more players in. Now, for me, the reason why I've not predicted them to finish higher is just a couple of things, really. It's going to be difficult for the squad to click together. There's so many new faces. It's almost going to feel like a different team entirely. I think a good portion of their signings are going to be within the first team. I think Sawyers is going to be a really good example of that. Kipre should be within the first team as well. And I think two great signings on their part there. And then you've got those other ones where I do think they've got great potential, like in Ebou Adams with the goals he scored with Forest Green, but not necessarily going to be within the first team straight away. So they've got a good improvement in their depth, and I think that could be beneficial to them. Steve Morrison, I've been leaning to like him a little bit more. I've now just kind of seen, the turnaround that Cardiff have made, considering what they were like last year at times with Mick McCarthy. They have really, really improved. So I think it's a matter of patience. It feels like this is a transitional year. So Cardiff should not feel too disappointed if they don't finish all that high on the table. But if it clicks well, I think they can improve. So for me, I think they will finish higher than my 17th place if I had to move, Cardiff in my table.
Wonderful. I'll put Cardiff in higher. We both agree on that one. And next up is Coventry City. I'm intrigued to know your prediction because this is my team, but it's my turn to place. And this is really hard because out of all the championship teams, as much as I'd like to claim I know much about most, Coventry's a team I know the most about, of course. And obviously a prediction can go absolutely either way, but I do trust in us climbing the table on last season. I put us in 8th. Now, if I was to change it, whether it's higher or lower, I'd probably only change it by one place because I'm that sure we'll be close to the playoff battle, but I just think we could just fall short. It's so tricky, this. I think the players we've brought in they look okay. I think Panzo's a good addition. We've got Doyle as well, and Casey Palmer. If he can get into that team, he could be really decent. I think the players we've held on to is what's really giving me more hope. We've had interest in O'Hare and Hamer and even Gyökeres at one point, and we have kept them for now. This is so tricky. Do you know what? I will just give Coventry the benefit of the doubt, and I think I was umming and ahhing about 7th or 8th, and I'll say, because I've put them 8th, I would change it just to 7th. So I'm actually going to slide Coventry in higher. You'll have to let me know where you put Coventry and if you would move them higher or lower.
Not 8th place. That's all I'd say about Coventry. They are in my top half, to be fair, and it is a small improvement as well. I put them in 10th. So 10th place, I predicted Coventry to finish. As you said already, this period of the table is really, really hard to predict. The mid-table, and especially the teams fighting for the top 6 as well, it's going to be almost an impossible task for all of us predictors to get completely right. And Coventry, I was impressed as well that they kept the players that they've got as well. Their signings, I think, have been all right. Yes, I think, some could argue they've been a little bit quiet maybe, but it's almost to a sense that they didn't need to get too many players in. Their squad was already in decent shape, and the fact that they've kept a lot of them in, they don't need to potentially go scouring off the market. But I would want that reassurance that they could get someone that may fill in a position of a Hamer or a O'Hare or even Nicky Gyökeres if either one of them leave. I think of Middlesbrough, for instance, who are really heavily linked with Gyökeres at one stage. They really need a striker right now because they've really only got Ikpeazu or Chuba Akpom at front right now. And they really, really need a striker. And that's what's holding back with my predictions, which you'll find out in a minute. So for me, oh my gosh, it's also really, really tough. You know what? I might push them a little bit higher as well, but I don't think they'll be top 6. And I even wouldn't put them in 8th at the moment. I do think that region of the table is quite competitive. So I probably would push them up one place up to 9th maybe if I had to. So Coventry, I will agree with you and push them a little bit higher.
Interesting. Okay. Next we've got Huddersfield Town. Now, I haven't seen your prediction, I haven't seen too many other predictions at this point, and this is one I think people are going to be so varied on because they had such an impressive season last year. I think people do expect a drop-off, and whether that's a drop-off of 3 or 4 places or 10 or 15 places, it's going to be really hard. I've put them 11th, and I'm so unsure. I'm glad this is one for you to decide because I really wouldn't know where to put them, higher or lower. You'll have to let me know where you've put them.
Wow, well, I feel quite bad right now because because I've just before recording, I did do a bit of research and look at the other teams predicting and content creators predicting Huddersfield. I've officially predicted Huddersfield to finish the lowest out of anyone so far. Wow. So I'm really sorry if there's any Huddersfield fans watching this so far. I predicted them to finish 19th, which, to be fair, is actually higher than what I predicted them to finish last year. So it would be looked as a little bit of an improvement. But obviously last year, they made us look really, really silly last year with our predictions. And I said this in my video, that one of two things will happen because I'm banking on one scenario to happen. One scenario which will definitely really throw off my whole table is if they actually regroup quite well and Schofield manages to continue the great football that Corberán was starting to implement in Huddersfield, and they have a decent season, maybe not as great as last year, but still do all right. But I am drawing very similar comparisons to the Barnsley treatment they had from last season when they lose a talisman player and a manager, and the squad just was not the same and didn't even reproduce the similar numbers. And even the great players that they had, like Callum Styles, chipping in with so many goal contributions, looked like the shadow of the player. Sometimes a big effect of when you take a good chunk of a team, it affects the whole team completely. And I think Huddersfield might get that, but I don't think at the extent that they'll get relegated. I would personally say that I think they will improve. If I had to move them up, I probably would move them up maybe 17th, 16th place looking back now. But I've said my piece. I said that they'll finish 19th. And I've got to say, I'll wholeheartedly say, I wouldn't even be surprised if they do prove me wrong. But I'm just keeping in mind, knowing that how shocking, everyone got Barnsley wrong in terms of how well they did last year, and then they finished rock bottom. You never know the Championship. There's a lot of things that can change within, a couple of pre-season games. So I probably would push them a bit higher, but I definitely cannot change my prediction now.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Huddersfield Town. Next up, we've got Hull City. And when I reshuffled, because I did my predictions so many times and changed my mind, I just nudged Hull City up at the last because of some expectation. And with the new signings, I think Hull City are going to be one of those teams that have come up and want to push on in that second season. Now, I think this is another one where it's really tricky because I've put them so close in the middle of the table. They could obviously finish higher or lower. I'm just going to say lower for Hull City because we're yet to see how they start the season, of course, and how well these new players gel in. I've seen predictions for Hull City ranging from finishing in that top half down towards the relegation battle. And because I put them just a bit higher than I thought I originally would, I might just say lower. But with Hull City, I don't really know what to expect. Where have you put Hull?
Good luck trying to get me to say higher or lower because I have no clue, to be honest. I put them in 14th. Now, it wasn't a position where I, was trying to save for Hull City, really. It was just when you do your predictions, you just kind of do like a checklist thinking, okay, this team's moving around there, and you rejig a little bit as you go along there. With Hull City, I felt 14th was the perfect balance with my thoughts. So 8 places higher would have been 6th place within the top 6, which they could even be capable of if, everything clicks and they go and have a great season. But 8 places lower than 14th is the last relegation place, 22nd. So it's kind of within the middle of what could be expected and what could happen with Hull. It's almost like an expectations versus reality sort of thing. Are you going to get what's expected, or is the reality not going to be so pretty for Hull? And I can't really decide. I'm literally right in the middle of it. So to say higher or lower, 14th, okay. Maybe I'll say slightly lower as well, but probably not so much lower. I still think Hull, and I said this in my video with you quite recently, that I think they could be an overachieving team and could be a dark horse. And as I said, things need to click in right, but they have got quite a few gaps to fill. This was before King Lewis Potter left, for instance, and they've also got to try and fill the void of George Honeyman as well. So it's not going to be easy for Hull, but with already the signings that they made, it's very, very promising. And it could be a bit similar to Cardiff. They need to cope with this one season, and then next year they could potentially push up again. So I probably would say a bit lower, but who knows where Hull will finish. I think they're definitely going to be the trickiest team to predict.
Yes, they certainly are. They're going to be a bit of a wild card this coming season. Next up, it's your turn again, and it's Luton Town. Now, I've put them 7th, and I'm really glad this is yours to decide because I could see them finishing 6th. I could see them finishing 8th. It's over to you. Where have you put them?
I don't think I moved any team more around the table than Luton. And what really actually made me sold onto their position was actually looking at their recent transfers. Because I was immediately concerned when Naismith went so early within the window there. But actually, the fact that they got that business so quickly and they managed to get some signings to cover in their positions there and actually improve their positions as well, especially their strikers. The fact they got the Barnsley double of Woodrow and Morris, I think, is 2 really good signings there. I actually predicted them to finish in 8th. So a very similar part of the table. There's one team who I predicted above Luton, which I think will have a bit of an improvement of the season, and that positive momentum might just edge Luton just slightly. I probably would push Luton a little bit higher if I were to change my prediction again for Luton Town there, because I do think they're a really talented squad. I actually think momentum is going in the right way as well. A bit similar with Coventry, they seem to build every season as well, and they don't look like that they're slowing down. I just think the expectations for Luton is going to be what's going to be really challenging to them. And they did have a very inconsistent part at the start of the season. It's just going to be very interesting if they can cope with that. But I might push them up to 7th if I had to. So I will push them a little bit higher for Luton Town there.
There you go. We'll put Luton in higher. The next team, it's back over to me, and it's Middlesbrough. Now, I'm intrigued to know your predictions because Middlesbrough, I think a lot of people, including the bookies, expect to get into the top 6 this time. And I've put them 3rd. And one thing I said when I did my predictions video is that I'm putting them 3rd, but I expect them to battle for the automatic. So despite me putting them up the table on last season and quite high up to a point where there's only a couple places they could actually finish higher, I'm still going to say higher because I think Middlesbrough will either make the playoffs or I think they could break into the automatic. So although I've put them 3rd and there's obviously plenty more places below that than above that, I'm actually going to back Middlesbrough to possibly finish higher. So I'm going to shove them into higher. Where have you put Middlesbrough?
Not 3rd place, actually, and I'm a bit surprised that I actually predicted them slightly below you. I put them in 4th place, actually. So right around in that top half of the top 6, and I completely agree. I if you saw my video, you would say it. I am saying that they're nearly there. They're nearly there. They've nearly got a promotion-worthy squad for me. And I mentioned this already with the links with Gyökeres. I think they're missing a striker, personally, that's going to deliver 20 goals. If they get that sorted and they don't have to rely potentially on Matt Crooks or Duncan Watmore to kind of filter in from midfield to an attack, then I think Middlesbrough can get and actually battle for those top 2 places as well. I do think the competitiveness, we say it every year, is very competitive, but it's extremely competitive this year. And I do think Middlesbrough probably would be good enough to go up in previous seasons, but this season is going to be an incredible challenge for them. I probably would agree and say higher as well, but I might still not quite put them there at the moment. I might put them in third, but right now, if they do get a striker in, had they got like a Dwight Gale in, for instance, I think they'd be in a much better position than they are right now. So for me, I would say higher, but right now they're nearly there. It's so frustrating as well, nearly in the top 2 place. But I do think, personally, for me, even if I push them up, they might fall short a little bit. But that's really interesting, actually, for the fact that you said that you put them in third there. I do think they will battle for it. So it's going to be an interesting battle.
Yes, I think we both expect Middlesbrough to do really well. Next up, we're over with Millwall, and I think I know where I would say, because I've actually put them 6th. I always like to try and throw one wild card in there instead of it looking quite predictable and looking like the bookies' predictions. So I've actually put Millwall up a couple places on last season, and I feel like if this was mine, I would maybe just say lower, because I think they'll be on the cusp of the playoffs, and if they didn't finish 6th, I think they might finish 7th or 8th. But this is yours. Where have you put them?
Yeah, so I'm glad for that, because I think we're going to disagree a little bit. I put them in 9th, actually. So pretty much identical to where they finished last year. I do think they will be very competitive again. I do think the squad that they got is improved a little bit. I'm really intrigued to see how Zian Fleming gets on, actually, with his market value. He's promised to do great things. And in pre-season, he scored a wicked goal as well. I can't remember which team it was, but he scored a really, really nice goal there. I think the signings are implementing quite well within the squad. I just feel if they don't address the consistency away from home, I think it'll be a very similar finish again. Their home form is always very reliable. It's their away form that lets them down a little bit. And personally, Millwall, for me, don't feel like that. Even with the signings of them being really, really good, it doesn't feel like that the squad has gone that next level yet. I definitely think they've almost got to force themselves up the table a little bit. And right now, I just still think they may plateau a little bit. So for me, I might push them a bit higher. So it'll disagree for what you have to say for lower, but I'll probably push them right up to around 8th place or something, because they'll be in around that region. They'll be fighting for top 6. And personally, for me, I think they'll just fall short. But obviously, that differs with your prediction, because you're thinking that they'll be within the top 6. And that's a very interesting call on your part.
Yeah, that's it's kind of like our predictions are meeting in the middle there. So I've got them 6th, you've got them 9th, and we're both saying they'd go in that sort of gap between. Now, next up, we've got Norwich City. Now, this one is mine, and I'll obviously let you have your comment on Norwich. I'm going to guess you've put them first, but I'll wait until you say. I've actually put them 2nd. I found it quite hard to separate the sort of top 3 and 4. Norwich, for me, obviously have incredible experience at this division, and obviously with Timu Pukki and Dean Smith, who's obviously been promoted, not with Norwich, but with Aston Villa. I think they're going to be very strong. And when I put them 2nd, I thought, do you know what? Could I have put them first? So although there's only one place they could actually move into, I'm actually going to say higher. I think if Norwich don't come 2nd, I think they'll finish 1st. And it's annoying me because this tier list is full of teams we're saying higher, but Norwich is one where I'm going to have to say higher. Where have you put them, Alex?
I think that tier list will change in a minute with the teams that we've got coming up. But yeah, I'm going to have to say lower, because I have indeed predicted Norwich to finish 1st place. Predictably a little bit boring, but, you know, the reason why I did substantially all right in my predictions last year is because I was very, very boring. A lot of it was down to bookies, and a lot of it was also down to personal opinion. And I feel like this time, looking at what the bookies have got to say, I do agree that I think Norwich, in general, have got a great amount of experience. Their depth is great as well. And I do think Dean Smith as well, I think he'll definitely do enough to get Norwich back up again. You spoke about its success with Aston Villa's there. You know, Brentford, he did a good job there as well, briefly, before he actually moved on to Villa. And I generally think in most positions they've really strengthened as well. So not only have they kept a lot of their squad that they had in the Premier League, they strengthened in key areas and they've actually reinvested a little bit of money as well. So I was a little bit surprised with the amount of budget they were spending as well. But they do mean business. They definitely want to go back up to the Premier League. And I will have to say lower, but I'll probably put them in second if I have to move them a little bit lower. I never forgave myself 2 years ago where I put Norwich in third place and not to get promoted. So I'm making sure that I'm getting them promoted this time, even though it might be a little bit more risky that they've got a completely different setup than what they had in previous or prior years to this with Daniel Farke in charge. So for me, even with a change of manager, I think they'll still finish in promotion. But I'll have to say low because I put them in first place.
Okay, right, we've got Preston North End next. I put Preston 16th, and once again, they're in that bubble for me where I think I'd say Preston could range from maybe 11th down to 17th. And obviously, they could even finish outside of that, but that was how I felt. So if this was mine, I'd have maybe just moved them up. They were mid-table last season. They've got Ryan Lowe going into this season. I think their business is something that's quite excited me, and I feel like they were a victim of me being a bit wasteful with some of my predictions. I was just I find it so tricky with that mid-table bunch because I could see so many teams finishing 12th, but they can't all finish 12th. So I had to just force Preston down a little bit. Where have you put them and where would you move them?
Funny enough, you couldn't get any team to finish 12th, but that's exactly where I put Preston. I put them in 12th place in my table, right bang smack in the middle. And I think you've summed it up brilliantly, actually. I generally think Preston are the middle team right now because I do think with that bottom half region, you're going to see a lot of teams in the transitional period. You're going to get a lot of teams with a new manager, which will take a little bit of time. Preston's still got a relatively newish manager in Ryan Lowe, but the difference we've seen with Ryan Lowe compared to all the other ones is that he made a great impact when he came in right away. And I do think if he continues that form, I think in the form books, he would have been in the top 10 had he started with Preston last year. So you are right in saying that Preston could get top 10. And I think their business, I completely agree, has been really good as well. I've just gone into be a little bit below top 10. As you said, there's just some teams that I just feel a little bit more prepared than others and some teams just with better quality, sadly. And I think if they actually get another striker in to rival Emil Rees, it'll be a very interesting dynamic there. In terms of moving them higher or lower, now that's interesting now because I definitely can see them finishing higher than 12. But then I can also see them finishing lower than 12 as well if they get some key players injured because I do think they're relying on Emil Rees a bit for goals. I'm going to make it a bit different. I'm going to say Preston finish a little bit lower, which I'm a bit upset saying for because I actually really like Preston. I really like what they're doing with this team. But I do think 13th place was a bit of a disservice of how well they actually did play at times last year. But unfortunately, just based on where everyone else is, I'm going to have to move them probably down to 13th or 14th place, especially if they get Emil Rees-Jacobson injured for a good portion of the season.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you put a team 12th, it's so tricky to move them because you're satisfied with where you put them. We've got Queen's Park Rangers next, and I have put them 13th. I find these mid-table ones the trickiest because there's so much space for them to move up or move down, and I could really see QPR finishing anywhere. And it's the fact I was uncertain that I put them in the middle of the table. I generally think they have got the potential to do well, but obviously with a change in management and obviously players coming in and out, I could see them having a season of building and progression and finishing a bit lower. So I'm just going to say higher because I put them 13th. If I'd have put them 11th or 12th, I might have just said lower. I'm so in the middle with this. I think QPR have got potential. I'm going to put them 13th because obviously last season they did well. I know it's going to be a completely different setup, but I think Beale will have a good season. And I think if they don't finish 13th, I'm going to say they could just sneak into that top half for me. Where would you have put QPR?
Well, my actual predictions agree with yours. I put them in 13th as well. I think them and Preston are very close, actually. And I think the reason why I actually put Preston a bit above QPR there is that they've already got a manager and he's already getting a transfer window of players that he wants as well. With Michael Beale, it's a completely new manager and he's generally not even had a first-team managerial job as well. So that holds a big risk. But there's a lot of teams in that period of the table, as we've already mentioned, who are going to have new managers and have transitional years. And I've kind of put QPR a little bit, like right at the top of that a group of people, I should say, because I generally think their squad is probably the best out of this sort of region of teams in this table. When you think of the attacking power that they've got of Chair and Willock still in the squad, they've added Tyler Roberts to their striker options as well. Defence, they've got Joe Clark-Salter, which you'll know all about, playing in Coventry quite recently there. So they've made some great business, and I think that is what's given them the benefit of the doubt. And with their generic squad, I definitely think 13 seems about right. They have the potential, I completely agree with you, to finish 11th. But if Michael Beale can't get things out of control, they could even finish lower than 13th. And their pre-season, for what I have observed, has been a bit icky. So to put it, to call a phrase really, I just think they'll be a little bit lower than what I had predicted, actually. So I'm actually going to disagree, just to make things a little bit different. I probably would put them maybe 14th, 15th. And I generally think a lot of predictors are going to really struggle with QPR. I don't feel I've seen anyone predict QPR for top half yet, because I generally think in around top half, it's such a difficult region of the table to get right. And we can only try really, really hard with the bottom half of the table. And we've kind of put QPR as that best of the rest. But I'm actually going to make things interesting and say, of a what-if scenario, if Michael Beale doesn't turn out to be as good of a manager as promised and they'll drop down a little bit. So I'm going to say lower, just to make things a little bit different.
Interesting. Okay, next up we've got Reading. This will be over to you to decide. Now, I've put them 20th, which for me was almost like my wild card down the bottom end of the table, because when we'd spoken previously, I mean, I've in my early predictions, I said I think Reading might finish in the bottom three. We did a video where we spoke on which manager might get sacked first, and I said Paul Ince. I could see a way in which Reading survive in different ways, actually. Either Paul Ince might prove me wrong and they have a decent start. We mentioned how they've got some favourable fixtures. They need to get up and running nice and early. Or there could be a scenario in which Reading sack Paul Ince, but then bring someone in who's able to push them up towards the end of the season. So I've actually backed Reading to survive. This is for you to decide, though. Have you put them down originally, and where would you move them, higher or lower?
So I put them down, actually, 22nd, probably a bit predictably. A lot of people have predicted Reading to go down with Birmingham and Rotherham, really, around this region of the table. For me, Reading, I think, are the best equipped team to potentially survive out of the other two teams, personally, with what they've got in their disposal. The nagging thing, though, is really their injury problems there in their attacking players. That's really the big part of it that really doesn't make me have a lot of faith. Lucas João, when he was in, was very vital for this Reading squad, but he was only there for half the season because he spent the rest of his time on the injury table, and he really needs to try and get some consistency back, really. Same with Ajarius, same with Yaku Mate. They all need to play 40-plus games, and those three players by themselves could make Reading survive. They've also got Shane Long as well, maybe a bit of a sentimental signing for what he did previously 10 years ago, but despite him being around 37 now, he does know where the back of the net is. Could potentially form a bit of like an Andy Carroll type of player, maybe. Oh my days, this is quite difficult for me to pin down, because I could see it going horrendously wrong, and the board, we've seen it before, that they just would stick with a manager too soon and they get themselves into a bit of a dogfight. Or if they're really decisive and they can actually act well, they can improve it. I think Paul Ince is also a big part of me putting them down there as well. And likewise with you, I would love nothing more to prove him wrong. Full respect of him as a player, but as a manager, I've got very differing opinions there. So, God, I'm going to actually say higher as well. They could potentially shock everyone, because I think Reading have been in this position before, especially last season, where a lot of people actually were starting to pull Reading down, potentially as that team that Derby were going to overtake when they had their good form at one stage as well. I think Reading thrive on that, underdog story, really, and they could potentially find a way out of it. For me, not quite enough. It's based on the embargo, pretty much, with them only being able to sign players on a free transfer, really. But, they have got the players there. It's just really going to be their injuries that's really going to define their season, and Paul Ince for me. So I'll say higher for now.
Interesting. Okay, next up we've got Rotherham, and this is a team I'd put in my bottom three. You'll obviously mention Rotherham in a second. I think most people are putting them 24th, and I changed my predictions quite late on to just budge them up to 23rd. Now, if I had have put them 24th by default, I'd have to put them in the higher category. The fact I've put them in 23rd now means I'm open to being able to put them in the lower, and I actually am. As harsh as that sounds, I've put them 23rd, and I still think if they'd finished anywhere other, I think it'd be 24th, which sounds incredibly harsh. I just don't think they've particularly equipped as well as some of the, well, as well as Sunderland or Wigan. I don't think they're going to have enough for me. I think history says that Rotherham always seem to struggle. I will mention that last time in the Championship, they did come so close to staying up. And personally, I'd actually like to see them stay up. I haven't got anything against Rotherham. I just think it's going to be so hard. And I think Rotherham don't have enough quality. So I'm actually going to say they'll finish lower. And where have you put them, Alex?
Well, I'll have to put them high. I've put them rock bottom, like a lot of people have done as well. Simple reason, really. If you're going to get rid of your top two goal scorers, you're not really going to set yourselves for a great season either. Even statistically as well, with their goal scoring record, when they had Michael Smith and Freddie Ladapo, they actually were one of the lowest scoring teams within the top 7 of League One. And you've got to consider now they're in a championship season and they've lost their top 2 players there. They're going to have to rely potentially on Connor Washington, who they brought in from Charlton, who's looked quite good in pre-season. I'll give him that. And potentially Georgie Kelly as well might be a bit of a shout-out. That's one name I'm seeing Rotherham fans sing his name on there. So potentially he could pop by a goal or two maybe. But one player as well could change things for Rotherham could be Cohen Bramall, someone I do know quite well because he was a Colchester player for 2 seasons, was a really big part to when Colchester were once upon a time in the top 7 and a chance to go up via the playoffs. Pretty far away from those days now. So he's had a pretty good time at Lincoln since then, and now he's got his chance in the Championship. So they do have some players that can definitely prove us wrong. But as a whole, I just don't think they're within a Championship quality. And I mean, by default, I'm going to have to forcefully push them hard, but I would have to agree. It sounds really, really harsh. And I agree. I don't really want teams to yo-yo between leagues. It just, you want to have as different leagues as you can. And when you've got teams yo-yoing between leagues, it's not really good for them, really. And, you as a neutral, you want as an unpredictable and as a variety of a league as you can. So I definitely want Rotherham to survive as well. But realistically, based on analysing the squad and what they've been doing in a transfer window, which has been more than what Wigan have done, but to be fair, I still think they needed to do a little bit more. So for me, I would have to push them up, but definitely wouldn't be any higher than 23rd. So I've got Sheffield United to talk about now. Now, I'm really intrigued with Sheffield United because if I remember right, you put them in first.
Yes, so by default, I could only put them in lower. Where would you put Sheffield United, Alex?
I actually put them in second. So I kind of got swayed a little bit actually with Sheffield United because originally I wasn't too sure. But then I'm going through the similar patterns we see with the Championship. For instance, we talked about, with a team having their playoff hangover and getting potentially relegated or down there. But then there's also a team that really takes the playoff hangover, by heart, and they really attack the season. And I look at Bournemouth being a really good example of that last year, who they actually competed against Brentford as well and were quite unlucky at times to miss out. And of course, the season after, they really, really bounced back and they did get promoted in second. And I do think Sheffield United have that as well. And they have got stats on their side as well. We talked about when you talked about potential manager of the season, I believe you actually said Paul Heckingbottom as well, because of his impact that he gave Sheffield United, in terms of points return, he would have been right up there actually with Fulham actually. So I do think if Heckingbottom continues that, and they were extremely unlucky last year, and the fact they were so competitive as well, and the quick turnaround that Heckingbottom gave to this core group of players there, I do think this season they're going to take very, very seriously. And a bit similar with Middlesbrough, I do think they're missing maybe 1 or 2 first teamers to really confirm it. But for me, I just think the depth that they've got and the quality that they've got in most areas, goalkeeper, defence especially, and then midfield as well. For that, they kept Sander Berger, for instance, is a really, really good bit of business for Sheffield United there. I might push them lower, though, which is going to feel really, really weird after I've just bigged them up so much there. This is based on the fact of how competitive that top four is. You said it there. The top four of the table is really hard to predict. And when you're going to move teams, traditionally, you'd be pushing teams lower, really, especially if one team below them has got like a signing that could potentially change things for them there. And I'm just almost assuming that they're not going to make too many more signings. I love a lot of their signings that they made, especially right in defence with Doyle and Amidosevic as well. But two great signings there. But if they don't make any more, especially in their attacking areas where they're going to have to rely on an underperforming Ildahi or potentially Billy Sharp, who's not the youngest of strikers anymore, or Ryan Brewster, who spends more time on the injury table than playing football, it's not going to potentially be, a successful season when they lose out on Morgan Gibbs-White as well. So I still think second just about, but there is a load of factors that could definitely go against them there. So I'll push them lower, actually.
Okay, now this is one I didn't want. It's Stoke City, because once again, they're one of these teams that I think quite often other Championship content creators say how Stoke City are one of the hardest teams to predict, and they're another team I have in this mid-table bubble, and I could easily see them finishing higher or lower. I've got them 15th, and I didn't want this one, but I've got it. I could flip a coin for this. I don't know your predictions on this, but I'm just going to say higher, just because I think it's so congested in the middle, but I could just see Stoke finishing a bit higher. I think their business hasn't been too bad. I think there's some people that are thinking optimistically for Stoke this season, but once again, history is telling me be careful when you're placing Stoke. So I'd maybe nudge them closer to 12th. Where have you got them?
Can I just say no change? I don't really want to change them. It's I put them in 15th as well, ironically enough. I've not actually looked at your predictions, but that's the scary part as well. I put them there. Oh, dear me. So Stoke, personally, we've spoken about this bottom half of the teams, going through a transitional stage. Stoke's kind of the one exception to that, because unfortunately with Stoke, you would feel with the amount of experience and gelling that this team's had with Michael O'Neill, they should feel prepared enough now to get into the top 7. But as you said, history tells us they just fall short with that, and it's really a season of two halves, which has happened for like the last 2 seasons. They start very well, one injury goes in, and then all of a sudden they forget how to win a game, and that could definitely happen again. So God, I don't want to put them any lower than 15th, I feel. I think they've only finished lower than 15th maybe once, when they finished 17th in their second season. So for me, I'm going to say higher too, but it wouldn't be much higher. I feel like quite a few people would say, they could potentially be top half or whatever, but I'm still, thinking that they would finish in around that region. I mean, I predicted them to finish 15th in the last 2 seasons, and I've been wrong about Stoke by 1 place in the last 2 seasons, because they finished 14th. So I've clearly not learned my lesson, predicting them in 15th place again. But I just have a funny feeling that they will be around in that area there. So regrettably, I would, I don't really want to change, but if I had to, I might push them 1 place and maybe might move, I don't know, maybe either Hull or maybe even QPR down a little bit. So yeah, we'll probably put them a bit higher, but we know how unreliable Stoke could be.
Absolutely, yeah. Stoke are just they're a nightmare for us who do predictions. We've got Sunderland next. Now, I'm intrigued to know your prediction. Okay. I'm going to presume you've gone lower than me, and I think I'm maybe one of the predictors is possibly putting Sunderland the highest, because although they've just come up and through the playoffs, I've actually shoved them into my top 12, only just. And I think the size of club is something that could really play an influence with that fan base to push them up just a couple more places. In terms of the quality of the squad, I think it is maybe just in the bottom half. I think they have got goals with Ross Stewart in particular, and we've spoken about Alex Neil as a very experienced manager at this level as well. I think if they can get off to a decent start and have their fans behind them in a positive way, I could see them finishing 12th. And I'm going to presume you put them a little bit lower, but this is your one to decide.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so yeah, I have predicted them quite a fair bit lower actually than 12. I put them 18th, 6 places lower. The thing is, I kind of understand what you mean about with the club size. I think that could definitely really, really help with that. But what I would say, I actually don't think the squad right now is really like within like a good part of the table. I actually think it's in like the bottom five, the quality of the squads personally, and that's kind of down with the lack of business and with them, having to try and develop players from League One. They've not got huge experience of the Championship. They've obviously made a couple of recent transfers that have come from the Championship. Danny Batt being one example that has got a great amount of Championship experience there. So the team's now, I feel, more prepared now than it was in the last couple of years, and I'm glad it's around this time when Sunderland have gone up there. I would probably say higher than 18th. There could even be an argument that maybe they can even finish lower than that. But I do think the size, as you said, but also with Alex Neil. I think Alex Neil is a very underrated manager. And what we do tend to see in around his first couple of years, he really does implement some good things. I think it was his second season with Preston that managed to get Preston to their highest Championship finish for quite some time. So maybe we could see a similar sort of uprise in form for Sunderland there. I definitely think they'll perform the best out of the three newly promoted teams. I just don't necessarily think they'll finish in around higher than 15th personally. So if I were to push them, I probably would push them around 16th place, around where Blackpool finished when they did really, really well last year from a newly promoted club as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tricky with newly promoted teams because some every now and then can take us all by surprise, and I suppose that's what I've gone for with Sunderland. Next we've got Swansea City. I'm intrigued to know your prediction, but this is my one to place. I have put them to climb the table, and that's something I'm very sure about. Obviously, it doesn't necessarily mean it's 100% going to come true, but I think 15th was maybe a tiny bit of a false position. Obviously, it didn't look great after 2 seasons of finishing in the playoffs, but they did change the manager, and something that caught my attention was their style of play. I quite liked it, and obviously they've held on to some decent players there. I think Swansea climbed the table, and I put them in 10th. Higher or lower?
I'll be interested to hear your say for this one.
I'm just going to say higher, even though I've put them up 5 places. If I was to shove them any more, I'd maybe just shove them up to 8th and 9th. In my early predictions, they were my wild card in that video where I said playoffs. And then when I came to this video, I looked at other teams and thought maybe I got a tiny bit carried away with Swansea, but I certainly think they're going to improve. So I'm actually going to say, even though I put them up to 10th, I think Swansea could still finish higher than that. Where have you put them, Alex?
Well, I'm hoping that I'm not going to get too carried away with Swansea because that's kind of what I feel I might have done, actually. So I put Swansea in 7th, just below the top 6. So, yeah, I think Swansea will improve. There's a lot of good things that I've seen in that squad. And actually, what actually influenced me to put them in 7th more than anything is the depth and quality in that squad. They've still got Obafemi. They've still got Joel Pirro, where his goal-scoring form last year, the fact he got 20 goals from a pretty rough start that he had in his first 10 games there, the fact he still cracked over 20 goals, I think he'd be right up there for top goal scorer as well this year as well. And now that most of these players have had a year with Russell Martin as well, I genuinely think it will be an improvement, as you said, but it could be an improvement that nearly catapults them right up into the top 6 as well. It just gets them falling short because I feel like I'm maybe being a little bit predictable and boring with my actual top 6. But Swansea's the one wild card for me that I think can definitely step into that conversation. You mentioned it actually about the biggest overachiever, and you said Swansea being a really good team, an example that could do exactly that. I might say lower though, because I have got them in 7th. I probably would think a bit silly to you. I probably would put them maybe 8th. You're realistically now if I had to change it. So yeah, we would agree on that. But it's interesting to see how different our predictions were there.
Yeah, once again, like we said with Millwall, I think you've put Swansea 7th, I've put them 10th, and we'd probably meet in the middle if we were to change our minds. Now, next up, we have got Watford. This is back over to you. I'm glad this is over to you because I've put them 4th, and I'm quite happy with that. I didn't really want to nudge them into that top 2 conversation, even though I think they could. But as much as they could do that, I could even see them finishing a couple of places lower. So where have you put Watford?
Controversial and interesting, and I love it. So I put Watford in 3rd. So I put them literally as the best of the top 6 there. It was really close though, because personally, what is really messing with me in terms of placing Watford, they've had this situation before where they change a manager halfway through if it doesn't go well. We know what Watford are like with managers, and it still goes well for them. And it's very much still like that. I think their squad that they took down from the Premier League is even better than the one that they took down the Premier League from the previous season, which is even crazy for me to say. Because not only that they've still got Ismail Assar, they've still got Emmanuel Dennis, where his stats were like rivaling like strikers from the top six, you know, in terms of goals per minute, which is quite incredible, really. And if Watford do keep him, because he has been linked with Forest and a couple of other teams in the Premier League quite recently, then I think Watford might use him as the catalyst to see if Watford could go up. I do think Rob Edwards maybe is like the best excuse I can say for not putting them into the top two. A bit unproven in Championship level, but obviously has done a great job in the EFL, getting Forest Green promoted to League One for the first time in their history. So, oh dear. You know what? I'm going to actually say higher. I'm actually going to say higher than that, to be honest. So I'll put them in second place, actually. And it's just very much regurgitating what I said. They've done it before where they've had, you know, basically a broken squad and a manager that hasn't really fit with their system. They've changed their managers, do the usual Watford thing. And the quality of the squad is just still good enough on its own to take them up again. A lot of that squad is still, you know, recognisable from 2 seasons ago, like João Pedro, Tom Cleverley, who played 2 big parts in that season 2 years ago. So I think a similar thing could happen, but for some reason, I just think Sheffield United might edge ahead of them there, which is why I put Watford below Sheffield United. But if I had to change it, I might swap them around. So that's probably what I would do. So I probably would put Watford a little bit higher.
That is interesting, yeah. Okay, only 2 teams left, and West Bromwich Albion are next. I'm yet to find out where you've put West Brom, but I've put West Brom in 5th place, and I didn't really want this one because I'm quite content putting West Brom 5th because I think they will improve on last season. Now I've got to determine how much I think they'll improve. They finished 10th last year, so my official prediction is they're going to improve 5 places. I think if I had to just change them, I'd maybe nudge them down just the tiniest bit. I think they've got a strong squad, and that's why I put them to be in this playoff conversation. If I was to move them, I wouldn't move them much. I'd maybe just move them down to 6th and they'd still just make the playoffs. But I've got some questions over Steve Bruce. As much as he's got a great CV as a Championship manager, I'm not totally convinced by him. And I just think there is, even though as good as West Brom are, I just think there's probably at least 4 or 5 more teams with just a bit more about them this season. So I'd only move West Brom down a tiny bit. Where have you got the Baggies?
Well, with that adjustment, you've now matched my prediction. I put them in 6th place, ironically enough, as well. So I do think West Brom, it's really tough because actually I think their squad and their business is fantastic. I think their squad was severely underperforming. You know, it was very clear that it was underperforming with Ishmael and Steve Bruce. You know, we're not going to ignore that. But the signings they got in, I genuinely think 2 of the best bit of businesses in the window is getting Jed Wallace and John Swift, 2 really, really reliable players in their own right. And now they're both West Brom players and playing for each other there, which I think could put West Brom up a level a little bit. You've spoken about Steve Bruce's CV. He has had 2 promotions to his name from the Championship, and he has managed to get Aston Villa into a playoff campaign as well. So in general, if he does manage a Championship club, you know, I feel like probably only Sheffield Wednesday being the only exception, he'll take them right up there in terms of the top part of the table. And I do think he'll do that with West Brom, despite being a little bit of a rivalry between West Brom and Aston Villa with his ties there. And of course, you know, I mean, he doesn't care about rivalries. He's Birmingham and Aston Villa manager. Yeah. So I'm sure he'll be able to brush that off. I really don't want to decide this because honestly, I don't want to move them any lower than 6th. But then I feel like they shouldn't really finish any higher than 6th either. Oh dear me. I'm going to say higher. Maybe, you know, if Burnley, for instance, you know, have a longer period of you know, of a losing streak, for instance, maybe West Brom could overtake them there, maybe. So, but by that front, I'll probably put West Brom as higher, but it would not even surprise me if they keep this mentality that they underperform. And I would have expected a little bit more of a clear out as well, actually, which they've not cleared out too many players. But overall, I do think the squad that they have kept in its core should be good enough. And if anything, probably should even be good enough for top 2. But with Steve Bruce, I can't give him top 2, in my opinion. And you know what? I'll look like the biggest idiot if he proves me wrong now. But I've got him sent for a playoff place at best.
Yeah, okay, we're very similar thought process on that. And then we've got the last team, which is Wigan Athletic, where it's going to be yours to decide. And I kind of surprised myself in the last minute of my predictions because I just put Wigan 22nd. I think I'm going to guess you've backed them to survive. You'll obviously tell us in a minute, but I think it'll be close with Wigan. What I expect is a bottom 6 or 7 finish. I just don't think there's massive amounts of quality. And I think personally, Wigan fans should be fairly pleased with just surviving. I think they got a good togetherness, and last season they were very impressive to storm the league. I think Liam Richardson is going to have to prove himself in the Championship here. I put them 22nd, and I think if I had to change my mind, I would put them to survive because I kind of surprised myself at the last minute by just shoving them in there. Where did you put them, and where would you move them?
It's like you've seen my table already, Matt. I have got them to survive, but I did get them to survive in 20th. So you're completely with what you're saying as well, in that bottom 7 part of the table. And what was interesting as well, quite a few I feel have got Wigan just to survive. I've got them to get relegated. I got them to actually finish the highest out of most people I've seen so far in 20th right now, which is not much, in all honesty there. But what I think that Wigan do have is that togetherness, as you did say there. They were, for the majority of the season, really impressive and consistent as well. I do think the biggest factor of people not predicting to finish any higher is down to their lack of business. And personally, I actually felt they did their business right, last year in League One. They got a lot of players in from, upcoming League One players and actually gaining a couple of good players from Championship clubs as well. And I definitely think their squad, little bit similar with Sunderland's, looking a little bit more prepared. I actually probably would say Wigan's squad, this might be quite controversial, but Wigan's squad for me would be better than Sunderland's. But right now, with the other external factors going Sunderland's way, I think naturally they'll just perform a little bit more smoothly. I think Wigan will find it a little bit more difficult to get anywhere higher than 20th. Now this one's really interesting actually, because I could actually see them. I was literally about to say lower so quickly, but then I thought actually 19th might be quite a realistic place to finish as well. So this is a tough one actually, because we've not said a lot of teams to finish lower. I think I would finish them lower as well. Probably a bit predictable for most of us viewers because we are having a very similar opinion that they'll finish, either around 22nd or maybe, just past 20th. So I probably would put them down as 21st. I don't think they'll personally go down. I do think their squad that they've got already is already good enough. And I do think the teams below them are a little bit in their own, league in terms of trying to sort out the issues that they've currently got right now. So personally, I think Wigan will survive. But if I had to move them, I'll move them down slightly from 20th to 21st.
So that wraps up our tier list and just goes to show how hard predictions are, because there's only 7 teams we've put to finish lower and we want to move 17 teams up the division. So it is pretty tricky, but get your predictions down below, guys. Thank you for joining me today, Alex. What can people expect to find on your channel? So on Lex Alexas, I'll be doing score predictions weekly as well. You'll be seeing more table predictions coming up very soon from the Premier League. I'll be doing some predictions as well for League One and potentially other EFL leagues as well. And what you'll definitely see is some live stream and watch alongs as well. I'll be doing a lot more streams. And what could be on the horizon, could potentially see a couple of vlogs to Ipswich Town as well. Don't want to classify myself as an Ipswich Town supporter, but I've made a promise to go to games, and I'm spending more time in Ipswich than I'm anywhere right now. So that is on the horizons as well. There will be constant content going around on my channel. There you go, guys. Like I say, go check out Lex Alexis, subscribe, watch his videos. I've featured in a couple, and like I say, support this guy out. Thank you for joining us. I can't wait until the season starts very, very soon, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Drop a like, subscribe. Peace out.